Good afternoon, everybody. I'll get this back because as I've been told, I'm a loudmouth. So, one of the things we're going to talk about today is basically kind of a different concept for those involved in stormwater or floodplain management in public works groups. Most of you who work in the development side know that you have to there's been a request for greening by EPA on a lot of your development sites. But what a lot of people forget, those of us in the public sector, EPA and TCEQ and whoever else is in charge of that week, they basically kind of put the same pressure upon the municipalities. And with our new permits have really kind of ratcheted that aspect of it up. But one of the big issues we kind of deal with is, well, how do you green up a typically gray system? Now, there's a lot of things that can go on out there. You see a lot of presentations. These are kind of some examples of what we've done in the City of Arlington over the last couple of years. One of the big things when you're dealing with, basically kind of decide what the problem is, why things going on there. And this is probably a fairly famous, little example here, putting out there what's going on with stormwater. Now, one of the things I always find interesting is whenever I first came to North Texas, I talked to some of the old engineers that worked at the City of Arlington, and they told me the only thing they cared about was the peak discharge. That's all we care about. You just match the peaks and there will be no problems. I kind of scratched my head saying, well, there's volume there. You get a lot of water in there. His all volume doesn't matter. That doesn't have any impact upon the system. Well, unfortunately, that has led to a lot of our problems. If any of those of you who've been in the City of Arlington, we flood a lot, at least we have historically, and a lot of our channels, our streams, I always laugh about it. We had a watershed study, and this elderly couple had said, well, they'd lived there all their life, and in 1970, it was only 2 feet deep and maybe 3 feet wide, and they could jump across it. And my survey cross-sections came in and said, well, it's about 20 feet deeper and about 100 feet wide now. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, revisionist history on their part. They're getting old. They don't remember what's going on. Well, luckily for them, I found the core model from 1970. They were right. So a lot of what has happened with our systems have really dramatically changed based upon the changing land use information. This kind of sums it up, is how things are happening and why they're changing. The other problem is this is quote an improved stream in the City of Arlington. There for a long time, we were very efficient at concreting everything. So what happens is, for those of you who remember hydrology, you speed up the water, you get more volume, it kind of changes the response of the system. So what we deal with a lot is that we have almost a significant portion of our streams in the City of Arlington were paved at one point. Now, the idea of those days were get it gone before the flood wave comes through. Well, what we did is we sped it up so much that we had all the peaks hitting simultaneously on the main stems, making things a lot worse. So, plus it led to the degradation, the erosion, and a lot of the other issues that we're dealing with. Good example of that here is you look there on the left, that's an area there in Arlington in 1962 and 1976. There's a little bit of urbanization there. You can look at a lot of houses, and that was just in a couple years span. Here's another example, 1976 versus what it looks like in 2009. Obviously, with the significant amount of increased imperviousness, no updates to the flood studies and everything else, we've had a lot of things changing, and the water quality, the flooding has increased, the water quality has decreased. The streams aren't real good about supporting any kind of fisheries anymore, and they're loaded with trash. Now that has something else to do with it because people like to dump their stuff out there, but it's not a very aesthetic aspect of a community, and people really don't like having that, what it looks like now. So one of the things we're kind of left with is trying to make that better. Again, another example. Here's straightening of the stream channel versus a section that wasn't developed. Ironically, the section that wasn't developed is on the Arlington Airport. But then when you add in the other aspects of it, all the storm sewers accelerating the water, we really get that water there fast and we speed it up fairly well. So one of the things is we're trying to deal with is slow it down and make it so it doesn't cause all the problems and then doesn't flood places. Famous presentation from Schuler out in Maryland from 1992, kind of showing how the hydrology changed. Those of you who remember your hydrographs from hydrology, the solid one is actually what it was pre-development. The dashed ones is what he shows as an example of what it is after post-development. So you get into peaks earlier, they're higher, and they cause a lot more potential degradation to your systems. So what do we do about that? Well, the traditional method, like I talked about earlier, is convey the stormwater and get away from the site as quickly as possible. We're now being forced to do things in a little more of a green fashion. People like, and green, I always laughed about it. Somebody told me years ago, says, well, let's just spray paint the concrete green. Well, some people may like that. Citizens tend not to. And it's funny because about half the citizens who call me now want me to concrete the universe, and the other half said they want me to tear out all the concrete. So I'm kind of left in this no man's land of making neither group happy, which means I'm pretty much doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing if nobody's happy. So one of the big issues is, we got to change the mindset of using stormwater as a resource. The aspect of most of you realize that those of you who have sprinkler systems in your yards, they've basically started limiting that. Well, a lot of it is, we either have way too much water or it doesn't exist. So changing a mindset of getting people to view water as a resource, as something that we can utilize and try to retain as much as possible, is one of those things that we're trying to start integrating into some of our designs. And basically, one of the things is we've been requiring that of the development community for a decade or longer. So now we're kind of under the gun to start looking at that from a public infrastructure standpoint. I always laugh about it. Somebody said, well, you guys don't do what we do, what you make us do. And I said, yeah, we are kind of like parents. We tell you what to do and then do the exact opposite. So we're trying to move into that realm where we lead by example rather than tell you what to do. One of the infrastructure considerations that we always run into, especially in stream channels and erosion issues, everybody generally says concrete and gabions are the solution to all problems. Well, there are a lot of times when they are a good solution, but they aren't the end all. So one of the things that we've started to look at is, does it make sense to use them, or are there other alternatives that we can utilize? And I'll give you an example here a little bit later, what we did. The other thing is a lot of times people only address the flooding aspect of things, but if you're addressing flooding, you can improve water quality. Likewise, if you're addressing water quality for your EPA or TCEQ permit, you can do things that will potentially have minor reductions in the flood risk. And if you're looking at things incrementally, every little bit counts. Every little bit that you can take out of the system or slow down will help in the end to keep things from getting worse. So one of the big issues is, well, you can't do it all. Well, yeah, that's right. You can't maybe not do everything on your design. So we have mixes of traditional versus green. We start to integrate things slowly. So these are one of the things that we take into consideration. I'm going to go through a couple of examples of what we've done in the City of Arlington over the last 2 to 3 years. Meadowbrook was a channel rebuild project, basically an old concrete channel that had heaved up because it was built on expansive clay soils. I did learn one thing 30 years ago when they built concrete channels in Arlington. There was this novel concept of engineering design that left out steel. We was carrying out those concrete channels. I couldn't find any remnant of steel anywhere. So it made a lot of sense why they buckled and went the way they did. One is River Rock Circle, a bank stabilization to protect infrastructure. I got a really beautiful picture of a 20-plus inch main that's kind of hanging in the bank, ready to start discharging into the creek. And then the Rush Creek Flood Protection Project. This is a flood protection project. First one is the Meadowbrook Channel. As I talked about, is a failing concrete channel. It had flooding concerns. One of the things that happened is the concrete channel started heaving up and going every which way. It's supposed to be a nice trapezoidal channel, and I'll show you some pictures here in a second. Remember, it was supposed to be trapezoid, so it kind of gives you an idea. Now, we've got a lot of these like this in the City of Arlington, but this is one of the worst ones we dealt with. One of the design challenges that we dealt with, we had confined space. We only had a certain amount of easement, and those of you who have ever done design for municipalities and had to go out and potentially acquire easements from 40, 50, 60, 70 property owners know the horror of what I'm talking about trying to deal with a project. So we were basically confined to dealing with the space we were dealt with. But one of the things we wanted to try to find some type of water quality benefit. And with all the other facilities in the City of Arlington, Jerry's, Big Dome, and the stadium, well, I don't, Globe Life or whatever it's called this week, based upon checks. A lot of things is they're trying to make the place look better. So we had a directive from our city manager that we wanted to look better. Well, one of the main reasons we want things to look better is concrete is a beautiful canvas for artists, and they like to paint it. And we spend a lot of time out there with guys with white brushes painting over it, so they clean nice canvas for them to paint again. So we were trying to look for designs that were less appealing to them for their artwork. So these are all kind of some of the things that we had to start taking into consideration in our design. As I indicated before, this is the Meadowbrook Channel pre-development. This is actually one of the good sections where we could actually see it, and it hadn't completely heaved. I did like the quick fix there on the left side of the picture with the corrugated metal. God honest truth. If you look on the right side, that was supposed to be kind of a 45-degree back the other way, but it's heaving over. So it gives you kind of an idea of some of the issues we were dealing with from these channels over the years. And you can see the ever popular solution of bag wall construction there on the right. So these are all things that were historically dealt with to try to stabilize and maintain the channel. What we ended up coming in with is we went to a block wall. Now, the reason we went with that block wall design is the simple fact is we needed to maximize conveyance capacity. The channel was grossly undersized. We had limits to what we did, and we went to the limits of what we could and basically maximized the size of the cross section so we'd get the most flow through there. But the one thing that we kind of changed up is if you look at that bottom, those are interlocking blocks. Under low flow scenarios, none of the water flows in the channel. It actually all goes down and kind of infiltrates in. It's interesting when the concrete section comes in, we get a little trickle of flow and it disappears. Well, the other aspect of it is you'll notice the blocks themselves, there's gaps and openings in there. Now we put rock in there, sand, but one of the things is it starts to fill in with a little bit of soil. And those of you who know weeds, because they grow up right through every crack in the sidewalk, we had factored into that, and that's what we were planning on, because we were trying to get a little bit of a green feature in there so we'd have a vegetation to kind of filter out what we could, but also kind of catch things, work as a filter, and then kind of green it up a little bit. One of the other reasons we talk about doing this is it makes it less appealing for people to travel down, especially those who like to walk down and climb over fences in the backyard to visit homes. So if you have it where it's not appealing for them to crawl through or walk down the channels, that was a good thing, and the police embraced that kind of a concept. Here it was earlier this spring when the grass is starting to come up, not overwhelming. We will go through there once a year and kind of mow it down a little bit, keep it where it's only about 2 foot high, but it'll continue to grow up. When we have a flood event or any kind of stormwater event, the water just comes through, knocks it down. Looks like any other ditch in the Metroplex or across the nation. The water pushes it down. 2 days later, it's all standing back up again. But we get that filtering effect. We get a little bit of infiltration in there. And it does help, at least from a water quality perspective, handle the normal low-end flows. Here's another thing. You can see how close the homes are encroached in there. So it kind of gives you an idea of the constraints that we were dealing with here. Now, there were a lot of people who wanted us to put it in a box culvert. Well, cost-wise, that was kind of prohibitive on our part, so we rebuilt this. This came out to be essentially the same as we would have put it back for concrete. So the aesthetic aspect of it, we figured out that they don't like to spray paint these walls. Messes with their artwork. It doesn't give them that nice smooth canvas. Plus, we get the water quality perspective, and we get a small amount of infiltration going back into the groundwater into the soils there, so it does help stabilize it a little bit. Another one is the next project is River Rock Circle. Now this is a severe erosion of a sanitary sewer. There was a previous Gabion project there that had failed, and it was only 3 years earlier that it had worked on. One of the big issues, because we were exposing so much to the line, we were worried about 404 permit issues. Anytime you're dealing with over 700 linear feet of a creek, the Corps gets a little cranky. Who hears from the Corps? Okay, I can badmouth them all I want. One of the big issues is we were trying to avoid a Corps permit, an individual permit. We didn't want to pay for mitigation. We were already paying for enough. We didn't need an additional cost to pay for somebody else. The other thing is the city council there was one city council member who was really excited. She wanted to see a bioengineered design. She was demanding we do a bioengineered design. So we had political support, which is usually the thing that basically kills most of these efforts. We came up with a solution, a design, worked through it. It was a design build option. We're allowed to do 2 of those per year under special circumstances, and that's what we went with. The reason we went with it is, as I look here, is the creek was kind of a unique situation. This red line right here is the sanitary sewer. And you'll notice right here the encroachment of the channel itself. We also had a storm sewer outfall coming in here, and this is the area that had previously failed. So this was starting to fail again. So we were trying to identify, basically stabilize this whole corridor in this hairpin curve, so to speak, and come up with a good way to stabilize it that was green, that was stable, and we wouldn't have the continued issues we were dealing with. This is what we started with. Beautiful, isn't it? Now, most people, it's not real clear here, but this apartment complex here, the fence up there, that was their 3rd fence. The other 2 are somewhere down the Trinity because they fell in and just flowed on down. So they weren't real happy with us, with the status of the creek. And one of the issues is it keeps coming closer and closer. Now, if you notice here, another angle of it, but see this little red line, this red blob right there, if you can see it? That was a 27-inch sanitary main. Just to the right of it was the manhole. And that's why we were getting concerned, because we felt if we lost any more, if hanging there, we were afraid it was going to buckle and start discharging straight into this tributary. People get cranky whenever stuff shows up down. They don't like seeing toilet paper floating in creeks. It's just something that they're kind of irritated about. So we were trying to avoid that. And again, you can kind of see the fence here. This is when they lost more of it. So this is a situation we're trying to stabilize and deal with it. So how do you deal with something like this? Traditionally, you come in there with gabions and go to town. You'd be piling rocks like there was no tomorrow. We came up with kind of a different idea on how to do that. Now, one of the things as we were moving along, we kept eroding away. You notice that the line here starts to become more exposed. In the interim, we put a lot of riprap right at the toe, tried to stabilize it under low end so we didn't completely lose it. But we were in that design realm and we had to get permission from the Corps. With a little bit of pleading with the Corps, they actually approved this with a nationwide permit. We're under no response requirement for mitigation, and it was an expedited review. It actually took less than 2 weeks. So it's one of those unique situations. If you go at them with a good design that makes them happy but still structurally stable, you can potentially fast track some projects. This kind of gives you an idea of what the before and after aspect of it looked like. You highlight the tree there. The left one is the before one. The right one is the after one. Now, I won't go into the gory details of the design itself, but I'll tell you the neighbors and the people in the neighborhood were ecstatic. They thought this thing looked great. Now, there were a lot of unique features about it. We'd stabilize the soil. We used earth anchors. We did a lot of interesting things to it. But one of the things that helped out is when it was done, it's green. And that's all they wanted. They just wanted to look semi-natural. Now, granted, no stream is that perfect slope like that, but if you look here, you can see the little plates. These are actually earth anchors with plates. We actually have a geotextile mat that's got openings in it so the grasses can grow through, and it's anchored in there with deep anchors. So it's structurally sound. It's tied in there tight. We also used limestone blocks that were cut specifically for our situation to create a series of drop structures or weirs so we can handle the grade and the slope of the channel. So basically, rather than having that shooting down, we have a series of cascading pools. So it worked out fairly nice in that aspect of it. This is probably the best example of the cascading pool and it in operation. The thing has taken some fairly heavy flows. We've seen water. We're over this weir. It's been about 4 feet deep. And we haven't had a real big storm yet, but we've had several of them that are good enough to show that the thing is fairly stable. Now, the one thing about this natural A-weir is one of my engineers, she took great pride in this design because how it looked out, but being the City of Arlington, it matched our logo. So, you can have a little creative aspect of your designs and, and put a stamp on for the City of Arlington in that sense. The problem with us now is they're changing our logo, so we're going to have to potentially redesign these in the future. Again, so before and after, so you can kind of see how this thing works out. There are a lot of features in there that were taken into consideration, but when it was all said and done, it was kind of greened up, and the neighbors liked it. A lot of people, the irony about this one is there are 3 city council members who live in this neighborhood, and all 3 of them were very intimately interested in this project. All 3 of them had high praise. So usually whenever stormwater, we're the bad guys because we're doing all the, everything we do, it causes problem, erosion and flooding, everything else. We were on their good side. We gained credibility over it because it was something that looked like an asset to the community and to that neighborhood. Some more pictures. Again, you can see the earth anchor blocks. They kind of give you an idea of how the thing was stabilized out. One thing is you go out there today, and we've given a lot of tours to a lot of municipalities and various groups in recent months, and actually over the last year. Every time we go out there, you see fish, you see, much to the chagrin of some of the people, snakes, and just turtles and everything else. So we are getting a fisheries and a natural community growing back in that stream that was not there when we started the project almost 2.5 years ago. One of the big benefits of it is kind of natural. It has but it's engineered natural. So it does stabilize, and it will withstand a lot of the erosive forces. We do have to potentially occasionally do some minor tweaks, but we have not really had to do much of anything over the last 2 years since this has been put in. And it's much more pleasing to the natural people who like to see things more grassy than concrete. And if you spray paint this channel, we don't worry about it. We just mow it down. One of the big things that people talk about green design is it's much more expensive. When we got all said and done, we actually did the original design of this design build. It came out about $1 million. We had some changes because, of course, we would have a flood event in there that made us change our design because we lost a lot of soil, had to buy more material, blah, blah, blah. Final comparison to Gabions, which is what we were planning to do, was basically, we were about $100,000 cheaper than a Gabion design. So on this specific project, not to say that all of them will come out this way, we're about $100,000 under what the Gabion design would have been. So it's probably about, from our situation, about the same. Rush Creek. Now this one's an interesting project because it was an area of historic flood losses for several years. We had done several studies to look at this area. Who here remembers Hermine in 2010 and Fox News with the helicopter over the apartment complexes or the condominium complexes in Arlington, and me going, I don't want to be anywhere near there because I don't want to be on Fox News. It was one of those situations where we had a lot of flooding issues. Now there had been an ongoing study to try to identify ways to address the flooding. There were several alternatives, and there was actually a sound engineering design that would have addressed it. These are some of the pictures here. Some of my favorite situations here. There's the good, the stupid, the ugly, the I don't want to be on Fox News anymore. This is probably the most interesting story about that whole process. The fire department, Swiftwater Rescue, were going out there and they were evacuating people in the neighborhood because they got trapped. The water had come up too fast. Most of them were elderly people who had little warning, and we didn't want them driving through the streets because the water was fairly deep. It was 4 feet or more deep. Well, so they're going in there with their little boat, and the outboard clipped a mailbox, sheared the pin. In the meantime, the motor won't run, and they see this jet ski floating down the creek. Lo and behold, there's keys in it. They reach over there, thing fired up, commandeered. So these firemen were basically going up and down this neighborhood rescuing people on this commandeered jet ski, and then the best part was to see them towing in their Swiftwater rescue boat later. Again, a lot of damage, a lot of issues that we're dealing with. So what do we do? One of the big issues that we were dealt with is there were a lot of people who were substantially damaged. How many of you out there know the FEMA rules on substantially damaged homes? Well, I know you would, Gary. Basically, what most people don't realize is if a home is identified in a special flood hazard area, a floodplain, a zone A, AE, V, or whatever, if it suffers more than 50% damage basically the damage being the value of that structure, not the property, the value of the structure. They have to be rebuilt in compliance with the current regulatory standards. In the City of Arlington, that means elevating all utilities and all the finished floors to a minimum of 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Most of these houses had anywhere from 1 to 5 feet of water in them, and we were right at the 100-year flood elevations. So it gives you an idea of how high some of these houses were going to have to potentially go up. People weren't real excited about that. We did have a CIP project, but it was in the pipeline. It was conceptual. It wasn't designed. How do you deal with that? So one of the things that came down to is they were dealing with is, do we acquire the properties, buy these people out, and make them whole, or do we wait for the project? Which, how many of you do design for municipal or regional capital improvement programs? How many of them get built, are designed and built in less than 12 months? Yeah, it helps. That one's pretty much in line with the decision process here. The city went after an acquisition and demolition thing, and basically they chose to restore it to open space. This is a very unique situation because we acquired 49 homes. We made offers to 50 homes. One guy is interesting. He has done all kinds of interesting things to his house now. I swear he actually looked at getting a little curtain to put all the way around it so he could go up and pull it up so he could keep the water from going into his house. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that he was investigating, but he just refused to sell. But we acquired 49 of the 50 structures, and we also acquired a 14-building, 100-unit condominium complex. The one that you saw the fire trucks over, that was also destroyed, substantially damaged. So it's one of these things where we had a lot of property that we were acquiring. So what do you do with all this stuff? Well, all the yellow are the properties we are acquiring. All the green are current, at that time, were current City of Arlington parks. So it made a heck of a lot of sense to go ahead and incorporate these into the city parks. Now, there was all kinds of concerns and controversies about the parks themselves, but essentially, we kind of viewed it as a way to basically let floodplains be floodplains, let them use their natural and beneficial assets to store floodwaters. Because we prefer to store floodwaters in a floodplain rather than somebody's living room. So that was kind of the city's decision to deal with that. Now you notice there's those little holes in there. Now some of these guys up here, they had actually built houses later up in this area, and they were elevated up. They were all islands. Most of them, their vans got pushed down the street, but it was something that their homes were safe, at least that they're safe based upon what our current estimates of the flood elevations are. But for the most part, those homes that were built prior to the flood maps, those are the ones we've made whole and dealt with it. Move forward. What we did after that is we basically went in and incorporated all this stuff into the park. The Parks Department right now is going through a process to make this a really big, nice open space to benefit the citizens. Here's the design, what they're talking about. Probably the most controversial aspect of this whole design process, you'd think buyouts would be. No. We took the old roads for the subdivisions out. And essentially we cut off somebody's cut through. Now, everybody else was excited because there's now trails through there. As an asset, they don't have to worry about getting run over by the 16-year-old in the pickup truck speeding off to school. It was one of those things where people, that once they understood what we were trying to do to make an asset, they were very excited about it. We always laugh about it. There was one guy here in the middle. He had built the house up. He had acquired the property through foreclosure. He was a builder. He built the house up and everything else. He was very against all of it until he realized he was going to be the sole island surrounded by park everywhere. And he became the biggest champion of the project you ever saw. Because he had one heck of a yard. So, there's some interesting aspects of it. We know a lot of the people, and we dealt with the people up in here, and they are all solid supporters of it. One of the things that people were worried about is the property values. Now, one of the talks that everybody worried about is, well, if you take out all that income tax, or all that property tax revenue, it's going to be a hurt to the city. But one of the things that people are starting to realize is, if you take those houses, which lose value because they keep flooding, and you turn it into assets that, these houses are good, and this is a big park value, their value of their homes go up and it offsets that. And there's arguments that you actually offset more by the rise in value than you do from the lowering of the home's flooding. So when we looked at it, it was pretty much a net zero. As far as the capital project, it was almost dead even, the capital project versus this. The break point was the annual maintenance costs of the capital project. Part of the reason we had gotten in the situation we were is because there were maintenance needs of it. So when you look at the long-term, the life expectancy of the projects, it may make more sense to make the problem go away rather than build something. So we started looking at BC aspects. So one of the big issues I talked about and trying to sit there and you try to figure out how to make things green, you know, as somebody pointed out, well, the only green thing they knew was Kermit the Frog. Well, my kids reminded me, he says it isn't easy, sang a song, said it isn't easy being green. So I stole his lyrics. But one of the things is it ends, that song ends up, is it thinks it's okay to be green, it's okay to try to do it and be that way. So that's what we're trying to do. It may not be able to do it every time on all of our projects, but we at least now it's a design consideration that we deal with. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.